This journey doesn't start with the scorching sun or the scent of spices. It starts with red tape. The ultimate pain point for any traveler to Ethiopia is the visa on arrival counter at Addis Ababa airport. A very specific, surreal chaos reigns here. The line, stripped of any order a Westerner is used to, feels more like a living, breathing, organic mass where passports are passed overhead while uniformed officials move with unbothered slowness, as if levitating above the fuss. You stand there, boxed in on three sides, feeling the damp breath of your neighbors and the rustle of plastic document covers, and suddenly you realize no signpost, no designated corridor will save you from this fluid, chaotic logic. Caught in this vortex, you catch yourself thinking that time flows differently here, and the first documentary proof of that is the calendar. While the rest of the world is living in 2026, Ethiopia is marking 2018. It's not a technical glitch, but the ancient Coptic calendar, where a year consists of 13 months. You automatically try to calculate in your head what year it actually is right now, as if the right answer will suddenly snap reality back into its familiar shape. The sense of a shifting reality grows. Your smartphone shows one date, while the wall calendar shows another. It's the first subtle signal. You haven't just crossed a state border. You've stepped onto a different axis of time, where civilization developed according to its own entirely unique laws. The air already smells of dust, coffee, and something elusively ancient. It feels as if the very process of getting a passport stamp is a magical initiation ritual, plunging you into a world frozen somewhere between biblical chronicles and harsh modernity. And as you squeeze your way to the coveted window, backpack tucked under your arm, a strange feeling sways inside you. Mild fear mixed with curiosity, like right before jumping into cold water.
By the way, if you want your passport to see more exotic stamps rather than just gathering dust on a shelf, subscribe to the channel. It's scientifically proven every subscription improves a traveler's karma and scares off grumpy customs officers. The journey south from Addis Ababa into the legendary Omo River Valley is a journey backward, a regression through the layers of civilization. First, the high-rises and paved highway interchanges fade away, replaced by the mud brick houses of roadside towns. The car still bounces on asphalt joints, but outside the window you already see donkeys pulling carts, stalls with torn plastic awnings, and women selling bright mounds of tomatoes and peppers straight off the ground. Then even this modest urbanism vanishes, dissolving into the boundless expanses of the reddish, sun-scorched savanna. The landscape becomes epic and unforgiving. The horizon expands to the point of aching, so much so that your eyes tire from this open, completely exposed distance. Gradually, the last signs of the world we know are wiped away. Power lines are left behind, the cell service dies out to its last bar, and the road turns into a bumpy dirt track. Trudging along its edges are not people glued to their phones, but tall, slender herdsmen. Their silhouettes, often armed with Kalashnikovs or ancient spears, seem to be a natural part of the scenery, just like the acacia trees on the horizon. Here, a weapon isn't an attribute of aggression, it's a harsh necessity, a survival tool in a world where the rule of the strong hasn't yet been replaced by written laws. You suddenly realize with absolute clarity that disputes over land or water here aren't settled by lawyers, but by reaction time and shooting accuracy. The sense of mounting wildness is almost palpable. The air thickens with dust and anxious anticipation. Every turn takes you further not only from comfort, but from all the conventions, boundaries, and norms you once considered absolute.
This road is preparing you for the main event, an encounter with a world that lives by rules written not in legal codes, but in blood, tradition, and the brutal logic of tribal survival. And the first to stand in your way are those whose concept of beauty can evoke both bewilderment and involuntary curiosity in a Western tourist. If in the Western world, beauty is about masking and correction, for the Mursi people living in the Omo Valley, it is a blatant, radical body transformation elevated to the level of sacred art. Their standard of female attractiveness is immediately shocking. A clay plate, or Debbie, inserted into a slit in the lower lip. The larger the plate, the higher the woman's status, and the larger the bride price her family can demand, calculated in cows, the region's main currency. In this moment, it becomes almost physically obvious that here, the human body is not a sacred territory of individuality, it's a family and tribal resource, an investment project. This mathematics of pain is simple and merciless. Immense suffering today guarantees material well-being tomorrow. The process of this transformation is a coming-of-age ritual that girls undergo around the age of 15. The preparation begins with knocking out the lower teeth to make room. Then, an older woman of the tribe makes an incision in the lower lip and inserts a small wooden plug. Over many months, the wound is gradually stretched by increasingly larger discs. The very thought of a teenager consciously putting herself through such prolonged discomfort makes you rethink your own teenage rebellions involving ripped teens and first tattoos. If we draw analogies with our world, it's like ear piercing pushed to a chillingly absurd extreme, where the earring becomes a saucer the size of a small dinner plate. The psychology of wearing this symbol is a mystery in itself. When asked by tourists, Mursi women show off their discs with detached pride.
But when strangers aren't around, the plates are often taken out, and that's when the most unsettling sight is revealed. The freed lip doesn't snap back into shape, but hangs down loosely in a long, flabby loop, a constant reminder of the irreversibility of a choice made in youth. This visual aftermath is like a contract with destiny set in flesh. There is no backing out. I met a woman who was considered one of the most respected elders in the village. Her status was highlighted not only by a massive plate, but also by the complete absence of lower teeth. They had been deliberately removed so the lip would stretch faster and better. "It's beautiful," she said, through an interpreter, looking closely at me with her dark eyes. "Your watch is beautiful. My plate is beautiful." There was no defiance or justification in her words, just a calm statement of fact from a parallel universe where the concept of beauty isn't measured by facial symmetry, but by the size of a clay circle and the amount of livestock it represents. And in that moment, you realize just how relative our universal ideas of beauty are. To her, the modern smartwatch on my wrist is just as exotic a quirk as her Thebi is to me. However, scars and lip plates are just outward attributes. The marriage rituals are much more terrifying and fascinating. While the Mursi shock you visually, the neighboring Hammer tribe astonishes with the very logic of their rituals, which flips all our notions of family love and loyalty upside down. The key to understanding them is the male initiation ceremony called Ukulibula, bull jumping. To prove his maturity and his right to start a family, a young man must run across the backs of several bulls lined up in a row, back and forth, without falling. The savannah trembles from the roar of the animals. Men whisper prayers to their gods, and what's at stake is not just one man's honor, but the reputation of his entire family.
But the paradox is that the main sufferers, and at the same time the instigators of the event, are women, his female relatives. Long before the jumping begins, the future man's sisters and female cousins start a ritual dance, approaching the elder men of the tribe with a request to whip them. They persistently, almost aggressively, demand to be struck with flexible switches, michi, showing absolutely no signs of pain. Their cries hold no pleas for mercy. On the contrary, it's a demand. "Hit me again, don't hold back." Every lash leaves a bloody welt on their back, which will later turn into a raised scar. From an outsider's perspective, it's an act of unthinkable violence. From the Hamer's point of view, it is the ultimate act of devotion. These scars become a visible guarantee. Now the jumper, whose initiation they bought with their pain and blood, is bound for life to help and protect these women. The more scars, the stronger the bond and the more reliable their safety net. It's an investment in the future, where the currency is one's own flesh. Essentially, it's their insurance policy, only written on skin, not on paper. One young woman named Abeba, showing me the fresh, unhealed stripes on her back, explained with dignity, "This is for my brother. Now that he will become a man, he will never abandon me. If my future husband mistreats me, my brother will step in. If I have no food, he will share his cattle." Her gaze was clear and calm. She wasn't complaining or bragging, she was simply explaining the internal logic of the world she lives in. Western feminism, with its slogans of bodily autonomy, doesn't work here. What works here is the ancient, harsh mechanics of tribal survival, where individual pain dissolves into collective security. Love here is proven not by words, but by the willingness to embrace suffering for future guarantees.
And the longer you look at these scars, the clearer it becomes. To them, it's not a disfigurement, but a kind of medal of valor. Let's be honest. Would you voluntarily agree to be scarred for this kind of insurance policy from your relatives? Let me know in the comments what you think about this insane survival logic. And drop a like if you're glad you were born somewhere where insurance is still handed out on paper. It's a strange feeling to watch a young girl, 25 at most, effortlessly hoist a bundle of firewood onto her head that I could barely lift off the ground. Her back is perfectly straight, her neck unbending. It's a skill honed since childhood. There isn't a shadow of complaint in her smooth stride. To her, this isn't a feat of strength. It's just a normal morning. Meanwhile, I'm standing there remembering how we complain about carrying heavy grocery bags. Another example, construction. In a Hammer village, I watched a new hut being built. The men sat in the shade, leisurely sharpening arrowheads or discussing important matters. The women, their wives and sisters, were carrying water, stomping clay and straw with their feet, plastering walls, and laying the roof made of grass and animal skins. It's their direct duty. If the hut collapses, the shame falls on the wife, not the husband. I asked through my guide, why is that? The answer was simple. A man protects the house from enemies and wild animals. A woman creates and maintains the house itself. It has always been this way. And there is an ironclad logic to this, however monstrous it might seem to us. You can't help but realize that in their coordinate system, female weakness is a luxury they simply cannot afford. Another facet of this labor is the market. Early in the morning, along dusty trails heading to the nearest village, lines of women stretch out. On their heads are pots of cottage cheese, bunches of bananas, and woven baskets.
They carry this for dozens of kilometers to trade for a little money, salt, soap, or fabric. The journey there happens in the cool of the dawn, when the air is clear and the shadows are long. The journey back happens under a merciless sun that beats down on the top of the head so hard the world slightly shimmers in the heat haze. They bargain passionately, with smiles, even though they are haggling over pennies by our standards. They argue, laugh, wave their hands, and this bargaining isn't just an exchange of goods for money. It's an opportunity to feel part of a large, noisy world. And after selling their goods and buying what they need, they head back the exact same way, now under the scorching midday sun. They walk, counting their coins and planning which of the kids will get a new loincloth. Taking a bus? For many, that's an unheard-of luxury. Even if one happens to pass nearby, buying a ticket is an entire financial strategy, not a spontaneous ride with the breeze. And the most striking thing is the attitude toward the elderly. The concept of being a burden does not exist here. A grandmother, even a frail one, doesn't sit staring at four walls. She is a living encyclopedia and a judge. She grinds coffee beans on a stone quern, watches over the youngest children while the mothers work in the fields, and her word is often final in family disputes. She is fed the best, softest injera and is given the shadiest spot. Watching a 3-year-old great-grandson respectfully bring an old woman a clay cup of water is a sight that brings a lump to your throat. In their world, where there are no pensions or nursing homes, old age isn't a fading away, but the final, respected stage of life, when you can finally stop carrying water, but your wisdom becomes the family's greatest wealth.
Looking at these women, from the hardened teenage girls to the old women wrinkled like walnuts, you realize their strength lies not in their muscles, but in an incredible, unbroken chain of duties, where each link firmly holds the next. This continuity is passed down not through words, but through the movements of hands, the habit of waking up before dawn and going to sleep long after it's gone dark in the hut. After all the paganism you've seen, it might seem like there's no room for God here.
but Ethiopia guards the greatest Christian secret in Africa. Transitioning from the primeval wildness of the Omo Valley to Lalibela in the northern highlands is a cultural and spiritual contrast comparable to stepping from chaos into the cosmos. This city is the heart of Ethiopian orthodoxy, the Black Jerusalem. Its miracle wasn't built, it was carved. 11 monolithic churches don't reach for the sky, but plunge deep into the earth, hewn straight out of solid volcanic tuff. Legend has it that in the 12th century, King Lalibela, inspired by a vision, ordered the construction of a new Jerusalem, and angels helped him in his work. The reality is no less impressive. Massive blocks of rock were trenched out along the perimeter, and then the isolated boulder was hollowed out from the inside over decades, turning into a temple with columns, arches, and altars. You walk through a passage as narrow as a gorge between rock walls, and suddenly a stone well opens up before you, at the bottom of which sit the perfect proportions of a church. Descending into these underground courtyards, you feel time compress. This is a Christianity that feels somewhat familiar in its strict fasts and icons, but it's draped in African rhythms. Here you see the same cross, but on a dark-skinned chest, the same boughs, but under a bright, scorching sun. Church services here are vibrant, almost theatrical events.
Priests and deacons are clad in gold-embroidered brocade vestments and luxurious velvet cloaks. Silk prayer umbrellas sway above their heads. But the main pulse of the service is set by kibero drums and the rhythmic rattle of sistrums. To their beat, the worshippers sway and quietly dance, creating an atmosphere not of mournful standing, but of a joyful collective trance. Ethiopia adopted Christianity as its state religion in the 4th century, and this antiquity is felt in every stone. You see the dust of centuries trapped in the cracks of ancient walls, and realize that people have walked these corridors praying the exact same words for over a millennium. They believe that the chapel of the tablet at the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion in Aksum holds the ultimate holy relic, the Ark of the Covenant, guarded by a single monk who never leaves the compound until he dies. This image, one man and one treasury of faith, haunts you long after, a reminder that for someone, dedicating their life to an unseen relic is as natural as going to an office job is for us. I saw a pilgrim, his hair white as snow, leaning heavily on a staff as he slowly walked through the courtyard of the cross-shaped Church of St. George. He had walked for 3 weeks straight from his village. With a trembling hand, he pressed his lips to the ancient stone cross at the entrance, and his face reflected such a deep, bottomless peace that it became instantly clear. To him, this isn't a tourist site. It's the exact coordinate where the earthly meets the divine. Faith here isn't just a part of life. It is its foundation and the very air they breathe. And when you stand right next to him, with your backpack and camera, you can't help but feel like an insolent guest crashing a very private meeting between a man and his God. Faranji on a walk. You are a walking ATM. The realization of this doesn't hit you right away.
For the first few days, you still try to be the polite tourist. You smile back, wave timidly, avert your eyes. You tell yourself, I need to be understanding of the country's poverty, that the kids are just playing around, trying to rationalize everything happening around you. But then you catch yourself walking down a street in Addis Ababa with your head down, staring exclusively at your feet as if looking for a dropped coin. It doesn't help. A piercing, endless chorus of children yelling, you, which simply means, hey, 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 shadows you everywhere. These aren't isolated beggars like in some Asian countries. Here, it's a flash mob. You take 3 steps, and from behind a mud brick shack, from behind a pile of trash, or out of an open manhole, they appear. First 2, a 5-year-old boy in a torn Mickey Mouse t-shirt and an older girl with a baby strapped tightly to her back with a piece of cloth. You stay quiet and keep walking. 10 meters later, there are 7 of them. 20 meters later, it's a crowd of 15 running after you in a loud, laughing herd. You feel their hot breath on your back, hear the slap of bare heels in the dust, and realize that stopping means opening the floor. Their interest is a cocktail of genuine curiosity and absolutely sober economical calculation. You are a walking carnival attraction and a potential source of income all rolled into one. Not only are you dressed weirdly, pants, sunglasses, sneakers, but you also have light skin, which in their culture has historically been associated with wealth and power. Plus, you probably have a magical item in your backpack called a bottle of water, which you didn't have to carry on your head for 6 kilometers from the nearest river. You never even thought that a plastic bottle bought at the airport could become a symbol of privilege, much like a shiny set of car keys back home. But the ultimate magnet is hair.
Straight, blonde, or red hair is akin to the bizarre fur of an exotic animal to them. Once, while sitting down to rest on a rock by the road in a Kanso village, I became the subject of a literal scientific study. 3 teenage girls cautiously approached me. They whispered among themselves until the bravest one reached out and touched a lock of my hair. "Soft?" she asked in broken English. "Soft," I nodded. Then the second girl touched her friend's hair, coarse, black, curly, and laughed, saying something in her local dialect, apparently not soft. Then began a session of collective tactile exploration. They touched, stroked, and ran their fingers through my hair, their faces as serious as scientists examining a new strain of bacteria under a microscope. I sat still, realizing I had become a living museum exhibit. There was no aggression or malice in it, just pure, childlike curiosity for the other. A few minutes later, their interest satisfied, they ran off without even asking for money. That moment of pure interaction, however, was a rare exception. More often than not, curiosity inevitably circles back to the question, what can we get out of the Farangi? Much more often, communication revolves around the material, and here operates an ironclad unspoken rule. You never give money. Never. Not a single cent. No experienced guide or seasoned traveler will ever get tired of repeating this, because handing over just one beer, the local currency, triggers a chain reaction that will be impossible to stop. If you give to one child, 5 minutes later you'll be surrounded by the entire village, from nursing infants in their sisters' arms to hunched-over old men. And they won't be demanding coins anymore. They'll want bills. If you refuse, the emotional blackmail starts. Crying, wailing, and from the teenagers, aggressively staring into your eyes and grabbing your sleeves. My travel companion, feeling sorry for a boy with genuinely sad eyes, bought him a pack of biscuits.
As a result, we literally had to run to the car to the soundtrack of howling and fists pounding on the windows. We weren't benefactors, we were traitors who had shortchanged the rest. You learn this lesson instantly, and from then on you instinctively brace yourself at the sight of an outstretched hand, just to avoid giving in to a fleeting moment of pity. Because of this, you develop a protocol. The most effective method isn't material currency, but social currency. I always kept a few printouts of old family photos on standard paper in my pocket, instead of candy or cash. Pictures of my parents, my country house, a snowy city street in winter. It was a magical artifact that worked better than any handout. I would crouch down, show the picture, and say, "My mom, my dad, snow, cold," and their attention instantly shifted from my pockets to my life. They poked their fingers at the snow-covered pine trees, asked if it was really ice, and laughed at our thick winter clothes. Someone tried to imagine what it was like to breathe when steam comes out of your mouth, touching their own stomach as if checking whether they could survive such a freeze. For a few minutes, we were just humans sharing stories, not actors playing rich Western tourist and poor African. The photograph became my entry ticket into their world, if only for 5 minutes. Then I would take it back, say goodbye, and walk away, leaving them to discuss what they had seen. It was an honest exchange, not a handout, and every little episode like this slightly shifted the lens, both mine and theirs. Another layer of this reality is local hustle. A white male traveler is a specific object of interest, often seen as an opportunity for a lucrative deal. Young guys will persistently offer their friendship, help, or company. "I'll be your best Ethiopian brother for the week," one jokes with a wide smile. "Let me marry off my sister to you, and we can all move to your country," another says, almost without joking. For many, this is a ticket to a different life, and your foreignness is simply a key that they think might turn the lock a little easier. There's a pragmatic undertone to it. In their imagination, you always represent a world where the paved roads never end. You quickly develop a strong immunity to these pitches, a polite but cold smile, a firm "no thank you," and a quick exit. Showing hesitation means giving hope, and here, hope immediately transforms into relentless persistence. The greatest paradox is that, despite all this outward intrusiveness, Ethiopia is one of the safest countries in Africa for a tourist. You only realize this later, analyzing your feelings. Yes, they run after you and shout. Yes, they look at you like you're an alien. But there is almost no malice or desire to cause harm. Theft is a massive disgrace, not only for the thief, but for their entire family and village. If something is stolen from you, which happens extremely rarely, simply announcing it loudly at the local market is often enough. The community itself will find the culprit and force them to return the stolen goods, because shaming the village in front of a Farangi is an indelible sin. And you begin to understand that the very collectivism that can sometimes be so annoying also serves as a powerful mechanism of internal control. One evening in the city of Bahir Dar, I got lost after wandering away from my hotel. Narrow, unlit streets, not a soul around. A group of young guys was walking toward me. Out of habit, I braced myself for the worst. They pulled up next to me, and one asked in English, "Farangi, are you lost?" I nodded. "Hotel Lammert?" he guessed. Another nod. Instead of demanding anything or laughing, they turned around and escorted me right to the hotel gates, walking 5 paces ahead like an honor guard.
At the gates, the oldest one simply said, "You are safe now. Don't walk alone at night." And they left, expecting neither a cent nor even a thank you. It was a lesson in the local code of honor. A guest is under protection, even if he is an annoying, constantly photographing guest who doesn't understand local customs. And that feeling of safety amid constant noise and chaos is one of this country's most paradoxical gifts. Spiritual food is abundant here, but what about our daily bread? An Ethiopian woman's daily life is an everyday feat. Every morning starts with lighting the hearth, grinding grains, and an endless cycle of cook, feed, clean, all without the kitchen appliances we are so used to. And at the center of this spinning wheel of chores is the food, which also tells a story of strength, poverty, and pride. Moving on to local cuisine, I fully realize that most viewers who value the comfort and coziness of their usual dining table will feel a visceral knot of protest. Raw meat? Nightmare, you might think, remembering strict warnings from moms and grandmas about parasites and food poisoning. And you would be right, from our Western point of view. But in Ethiopia, everything is governed not by sanitary norms, but by a centuries-old way of life, where food is a survival ritual, a display of strength, and the ultimate form of hospitality, before which any microbes from our world are powerless. This isn't just a meal, it's a theater, where you are simultaneously a spectator, a participant, and sometimes the main exhibit. And like any serious play, this theater has its acts, sets, and unspoken rules. Injera, the giant sour pancake that replaces your plate, fork, and bread. Imagine a huge round platter, a woven tray the size of a standard car tire. It is completely covered by a grayish-brown carpet with a porous structure resembling a dish sponge. This is injera, the foundation of everything.
It's made from teff, a local gluten-free grain that is fermented for several days, hence the characteristic sharply sour smell, which at first makes you think the food has gone bad. Our noses, accustomed to the aroma of yeast bread, rebel. But to the locals, this smell is like the scent of a freshly broken crust of warm bread is to us, a promise of a full stomach and home. But here is the magic. Onto this carpet, they heap portions of wat, stewed vegetables, legumes, and if you're lucky, or unlucky, depending on how you look at it, pieces of meat or fish in a spicy berbera sauce. The sauces here are a whole different story. Berbera isn't just pepper, it's a highly complex blend of a dozen spices, including paprika, cardamom, cinnamon, and cloves. It possesses a heat that doesn't burn your tongue right away. Instead, it slowly spreads through your entire body, making you break a sweat even if you're used to spicy food. First, you feel a slight tingling on the tip of your tongue, then a gentle warmth in your throat, and only a couple of minutes later do you realize you're sitting there with sweaty palms and flushed cheeks. And then the action begins. No knives, no forks. The rules are simple. You tear off a piece of injera with your right hand. The left is considered unclean, reserved for hygiene. Scoop up a portion of the wat with that piece and send it into your mouth. The whole process requires skill. The injera acts simultaneously as a utensil, an edible napkin, and the base of the dish. Your first attempts look like a child's game. Sauce drips on your fingers, pieces of vegetables slip out.
The locals watch this struggle with a good-natured smile, but for them, the motion is honed to automatic perfection, deft, fast, and clean. Amazingly, this sponge absorbs the sauce perfectly, and by the end of the meal, the tray plate is practically spotless. Eco-friendly, albeit unusual.
Plus, there is something ancient, almost primal about this way of eating. You are literally taking food from a common center with your bare hands, as if confirming your belonging to the circle. For our audience, raised on the principle of everyone gets their own plate, eating from a communal dish can be a psychological barrier, but here it holds a deep sense of community. You are sharing a meal, literally touching the same food. It's a sign of trust and acceptance into the fold. To refuse is to insult your hosts in the most serious way. And when the hostess tears off a small piece of injera and personally feeds it directly into your mouth, a tradition called gursha, it is a gesture of profound respect, almost maternal. It's her way of saying, you are one of us now. Eat with us as we do. Teresega. The cult of eating raw beef and why they aren't afraid of parasites. Eating raw meat here isn't a game of gastronomic roulette. It's an entire cultural tradition where safety is ensured by the careful selection of the freshest meat and strict rules. Here, a raw cut of beef isn't a sign of an undercooked dish, but a demonstration of trust in the host and his livestock. The animal is slaughtered immediately before the meal, right in front of the guests or in the neighboring yard, so no one can doubt its freshness. The meat is sliced into long, even strips or small cubes, ensuring there isn't a single dark, weathered crust on the plate. Alongside it, they place bowls with spicy berbere, oil, and salt. Everyone cooks their own piece by dipping it into the seasonings as if putting up a protective shield. For us, a raw, red slab of meat on a plate is a cue to grab our phones and frantically Google food poisoning symptoms. For them, it is the highest form of hospitality. The men sit up straight, leaning their entire bodies toward the dish, and with a look of intense concentration, they select a piece.
As if testing not only its taste, but also the strength of the animal that gave its life for them. Women usually participate less frequently in this specific cult, more often serving, bringing out food, and making sure the side dishes and sauces don't get cold. But it was their invisible labor, washing and sharpening the knives, clearing the space, preparing the spices, that made even this seemingly male feast possible. You sit in front of this circle of meat, and you feel everything you were taught back home screaming at you. Meat must be well done. Don't eat in sketchy places. Watch out for the water. All these voices rise up in a chorus of protest. But right across from you are the host's eyes, shining with absolute pride as he pushes the plate closer to you. He doesn't understand what you're afraid of. He is offering you the absolute best he has. And in that moment, the question of parasites fades into the background, because not only your digestion, but the entire tone of your future relationship depends on your reaction. Refusal equals an insult. Acceptance is a sign that you embrace their rules. In the end, you take the smallest, neatest piece, dip it into the fiery orange berbere, feel the sticky warmth of fresh meat beneath your fingers, and put it in your mouth. The taste turns out to be nothing like what you expected. This isn't a restaurant kitchen, and it's not a nightmare from a hygiene textbook. The meat is dense, slightly sweet, and warm. The spices burn your lips, preventing any internal disgust from kicking in. A couple of seconds later, you realize you're still alive. The world hasn't collapsed, your stomach hasn't exploded, and the men around you are nodding in approval. You've passed the test. And in this small piece of raw beef, the entirety of Ethiopia is suddenly concentrated. A country where it's never about comfort, but always about trust. Not about our fears, but about their centuries-old rules of the game.